looking at Pfizer's quarterly earnings, which were just released. Comirnaty had a pretty good quarter. I guess there was some catch up from last quarter, and there was a bivalent update to the vaccine, so pretty impressive result there. Doesn't look like it'll last into 2023 as they're guiding a pretty ugly 2023, but the Q4 was amazing. PAXLOVID got off to a good start. First real quarter was $1.5 billion, then $8 billion, then $7.5 billion, and now we're down to $1.8 billion. So really ugly landing for PAXLOVID. Although one must ask, how large did you expect this drug to be? But I thought they would have a softer landing than that. I guess with COVID disappearing, do you really need a COVID antiviral? Probably not. PAXLOVID, we'll get to their guidance in a second. In fact, maybe let's go to the guidance now, because it was pretty, I think it's probably roughly in line with what people thought. It's probably a tad disappointing. I think some people, Pfizer bulls, probably thought we'd see more of a steady drop off in Comirnaty, which is their brand for the COVID vaccine. But it looks like Pfizer basically is saying that don't expect much from Comirnaty in 2013. And, of course, bulls would say, well, they're being conservative. But I think the reality is they're probably not being too conservative. They're probably, let's see, my estimates are a little low because of the last quarter, but that's roughly what I was expecting. No kidding. That's a funny guess because I was just guessing. I bet something in this territory. Maybe less. I think I had a smaller number actually. Let's see. Yeah, I was probably more bearish than most. But Pfizer is saying they'll sell $13.5 billion of the COVID vaccine next year, which is down 64%. And they have some interesting assumptions there. Some funny assumptions we'll get to in a second that I thought were I've never seen stuff like that before, but it sounds like Pfizer's assuming COVID will go away, which is good news for all of us. It's not good news for Pfizer, right? But it's good news for all of us. The less Pfizer makes in money, the less sick we all are, which is good. So they're saying PAXLOVID will sell $8 billion, which is really weird because last quarter was pretty bad. In fact, it seems like it'd be really hard for them to sell $8 billion given they're not even run rating at $8 billion. And it seems to be dropping precipitously. That seems like I'm not going to listen to that. That seems way too optimistic. But I'll give them a little benefit of the doubt and adjust my numbers to say $6 billion. I would think less than that, but I want to give some deference to their guidance. But I know that there's some downside risk to that. So they're saying that there'll be sales through traditional commercial markets. So that means that you will have to pay, or your insurance will have to pay for PAXLOVID or Comirnaty. And I think what their goal is to actually charge insurance quite a lot more than they would charge the government. So they might get a lot less units and still be able to hit these numbers of 8 billion and 13.5 billion. So I'm going to stay a little bit below those two numbers, but I think that's kind of where Pfizer is. Take a look at these assumptions. These are really humorous. These are normal things you would see, but now there's a 2023 guidance for Comirnaty, which is the estimated proportion of the U.S. population that receives a vaccine. So really interesting way to put it, 24%, 31% last year. Decrease due to fewer primary vaccinations and lower compliance. Estimated number of doses per vaccinated person per year on average, 1.3. Estimated Comirnaty market share, 64%. U.S. demand, 65 versus 92 last year, etc. So it'll be really interesting to see what'll happen in 2023. My guess is they'll probably miss these numbers. Getting management's tenor on the conference call will be pretty important. The site I'm using is my own site called 𝗙𝗏𝗏. It's in beta testing right now. All right, ELIQUIS. Look, a little light maybe, a little light. PREVNAR. PREVNAR was Pfizer's biggest product for a while. Then COVID hit. Primary care, is that where we're putting PREVNAR now? Ooh, big quarter for PREVNAR. Probably some catch up now that COVID's kind of receding, but all right, PAXLOVID. All right, Ibrance, this is their breast cancer drug. It's been a bit weak for a while. I'm surprised I had it growing because I think it's been shrinking a tiny bit. VYNDAQEL, that's their big rare disease drug. It's now their biggest specialty care drug. So VYNDAQEL, a great quarter, wow. Really big quarter there. Run trailing 12 months, or well, now it's just 2022 revenue for VYNDAQEL, $2.4 billion, wow. Great product. Xeljanz has been a disaster as people get scared of JAK inhibitors now, or at least Xeljanz. Enbrel continues its decline to zero. Pfizer has ex-US Enbrel rights while Amgen has the US rights. Xtandi, which is not a good deal for Pfizer in my opinion. Xtandi just keeps nudging ahead a little by little. So that's, I think, a record quarter for Xtandi. ELIQUIS, ooh, big softness there. They may no longer be disclosing some of these, so we'll see. We're getting to products that are less and less important for Pfizer. The big ones are all, we've just looked through all the big ones. They have a bunch of biosimilars, which is kind of funny. And here's one, Inflectra, that seems to be declining pretty quickly. Ruxience, this is the Rituxan biosimilar. All the biosimilars seem to be quite weak. This was supposed to be a big market for pharma to sort of catch up with biotech, and it just hasn't seemed to be what anybody wanted. Sutent, which was one of the first kinase inhibitors, now generic. Oh, there's 𝗥𝗘𝗢𝗢. 𝗥𝗘𝗢𝗢 is acquired in the Global Blood Therapeutics acquisition, GBT. Let's see, do they call it immunoglobulins, or do they just have... They're Nurtec now, also as a disclosed product, so we got that. That is the drug they got from Biohaven. Nurtec, ODT, Vydura. So I don't know what they're doing with, oh, there it is, immunoglobulins. All right, Premarin, very old drug from the old company American Home Products, which very few people here will remember, unless you're a student of business or pharmaceuticals. American Home Products was a company from a long time ago, changed its name to Wyeth, and then was acquired by Pfizer. Premarin is estrogen, made from horse estrogen actually. Still being used, surprisingly, even though it causes breast cancer if you use it too much. Medrol 93, Nimenrix. I think that's a meningitis vaccine, I'm not sure. Lorbrena, that's a new kinase inhibitor for oncology. Lots of little products. Pfizer's like quite diverse with these bulky little products. I'm sure Pfizer would rather be a little more streamlined. And this is after their spin-off of Viatris or Upjohn, which created their merger with Mylan to create Viatris. The Pfizer earnings, reaction to the earnings, not really significant, kind of basically a non-event, but still very important for us analysts to look at very closely. Bavencio is starting to get relevant in the PD-1 game. Maybe not too relevant, but starting to contribute a little bit. VFend 55, this is an old drug. Aromacin, another old drug. Surprised they still disclose 𝗕𝗢𝗢𝗓. I bet that won't be back next year. Trazimera is their Herceptin biosimilar. You can see the biosimilars, just not doing that great. No other way to say it. Raftovi and Mektovi also suspect, and you gotta wonder if Pfizer regrets the Array acquisition. it's gonna turn out, I think, that Pfizer's COVID boom will not really have changed the company very much, which I think a lot of people will be surprised by that take, because it was an enormous amount of revenue, right? Let's see, for 2023 to the beginning of COVID, you're looking at 86 billion in revenue. But remember, that's not a high gross margin product. So they do have to split with BioNTech. So if you think about that plus taxes, maybe you're looking at 30 or 40 billion, but Pfizer has wasted, like the Array deal, right? And the Medivation deal. Pfizer kind of overpaid for a number of assets. So one would almost say that, COVID's going to basically be a non-event for Pfizer, which is kind of crazy to think about. If you had the biggest product in pharma history, and the problem is they just kind of squandered these cash flows, in my opinion, with kind of somewhat bad deals. Sometimes you have some pretty good deals too, but in general, they've done sort of bad deals. I'm not sure they got a good deal out of Biohaven either, for example. Maybe there'll be variants of COVID. Maybe there won't be. I mean, they're telling us that 2023 is going to be a pretty bad year. So I'm hoping COVID just goes away. But, it's certainly possible that, COVID will be here forever and there'll always be a need for COVID products. It's possible, for sure. Quarter was 23.9 billion. Gonna make a few adjustments here for the other section. Let's take a look. Other specialty care, I think that's other hospital. Other primary, other infectious, center one. Oh, I gotta add 𝗥𝗘𝗢𝗏. I still have center one here somewhere, there it is. Oncology, and now 𝗥𝗘𝗢𝗏, which is 73 million. All right, so 24,290. I think I've got some mess up in here somewhere, small amount. Oh, I think I see it now. 24,287 and 24,290. So pretty much the same number. They sometimes have a rounding thing, which is kind of annoying. Now let's look at margins. So non-GAAP cost of goods sold were roughly the same. Really big COGS difference for me because I didn't think Comirnaty would have the catch-up quarter that they had. So margin's a lot lower than Pfizer would have wanted, all the way down to 60%, which is kind of like when they had tons of COVID revenue. That's the kind of margins they had. Spot on the SI&A. We'll take a look at R&D in a minute. All right, 94.75, 4414, so a little higher there. 656. Okay, good. I was very confused for a second how they could hit that net income number. Okay, here's R&D. 3615. And almost no taxes for Pfizer. Wow. It's amazing. All right, so yeah, roughly a 12% tax rate. Can you imagine? Yeah, I guess I'm having a hard time seeing how they can hit their guidance number. But, I am more bearish on the COVID vaccine than financially bearish, at least, than I guess they are. So, but even with their numbers, it seems hard to hit what they're talking about. It could be new products. It could be PREVNAR, RSV, 𝗥𝗙𝗦, meningococcal. It has to be these new products that'll meet the gap here, but I'm still short several billion. About 3 or 4 billion at least, so those new products might do 3 or 4 billion. Yep, not a big reaction. Merck's PREVNAR competitor, we'll just see how they launch. Pfizer's got a little bit of mind share. PREVNAR, the margins for Pfizer have to go up kind of back to their old 80%. But I guess it depends on how fast COVID disappears. Okay, so this is roughly their guidance, 325 to 345. I've got 340. So I don't know. I think if you zero out the COVID products, that's kind of a decent way to look at it, to be honest. And you'd have to bump the margins and adjust the costs, obviously. But now you're looking at not much earnings. Let's see, let's bump these. You also have to look at the new products, because the new products are coming. And you could put kind of a little multiple on this number, which is $2. Looks like Pfizer's kind of a little overvalued regardless. Maybe fairly valued if you're lucky. Delusional that they can hit these numbers still. To me, my gut reaction, they're way too optimistic and that COVID will just disappear. But I've wanted that for a long time. Part of that is a psychological coping mechanism. Oh wow. 2030 non-COVID revenue.
Between 2025 and 2030. And our long-term projections for our COVID-19 products. We will try to address. So what does this mean for our revenues? We expect 2023 to be a transition year in the US. In 2022, we sold at pandemic prices more doses than were eventually used. This resulted in a government inventory build
I wonder if that's
that we expect to be absorbed sometime in 2023, probably the second half of the year. Around that time, we expect to start selling.
So they're basically saying they're going to do like 20 billion in 2024. That is so weird.
Commercial price to remain relatively stable with only inflation-like price increases.
They're definitely not saying COVID's going away.
Now, let me briefly run to PAXLOVID.
That's bullish.
We estimate that 110 million COVID-19 symptomatic infections
were
reported in the world,
5-6 years.
Were treated with approximately 14 million oral therapy courses, with approximately 90% market share. Average was 86, but in the second half of the year, I exceeded the 9. Keep in mind that this reflects a full year of reported infections, but only a partial year of PAXLOVID.
Yeah, it's surprising that
Likely at 2% annually, due to waning immune protection of the population resulting from reduced vaccination rates. Similarly, we expect treatment rates to increase as awareness, education, and additional oral entries will grow the oral antiviral market.
Pretty bullish outlook, gotta say.
Finally,
Pfizer might be
we
a good buy.
expect PAXLOVID to maintain very high share despite additional competitive entries, given its strong benefit-risk profile and brand recognition. In 2022,
This is
we sold
either
at
very
pandemic
bullish or very
prices
delusional.
more treatment courses than were eventually used. This resulted in a government inventory build that we expect to be absorbed sometime in 2023, probably second half. Around that time, we expect to start selling PAXLOVID through the commercial channel. We expect in years 2024 and beyond that the courses sold and used will align closely together within every year. We expect we will be able to sell effectively under government reimbursement through end of March.
I don't think
And
PAXLOVID is going to be a big
China's
product
recent
regardless.
decision not to include PAXLOVID on the country's natural drug reimbursement list, we expect to offer the product on the private market after April 1st, unless, of course, a listing opportunity opens up before then. Lastly, I want to point out that while we are expecting increased utilization in all regions of the world as infections increase. We are not including any major non-US or non-China contracts in our 2023 forecasts.
Okay, so they're gonna take out the CDK6 out of Ibrance. Interesting.
Due to dose-limiting hematological adverse events, right? In combination with fulvestrant or letrozole reached nearly 30%. And the clinical benefit rate was approximately 50% in 21 patients with measurable disease.
So yeah, on one hand, it feels like they're a little delusional about kind of the likelihood of their business sort of persisting post-COVID. They don't think there is going to be a post-COVID. This will last forever. Which, you know, a few of the other analysts, I say other analysts, I mean a few of the analysts on the call kind of poked at that a little and said, wait a second, is COVID never going to end? That seems pretty unreasonable. Is COVID really never going to end? That doesn't sound right. And they basically said, no, it's never ending. Which really is kind of out of control. I do think that in 2023 you're going to get some people still vaccinating, but it seems like, I guess we just don't know. You know, they're going to have to execute. Pfizer stock is only attractive if Pfizer's vision of COVID comes true, which seems, again, quite unlikely given the circumstances. And of course, yeah, BioNTech is much more levered to this reality than anyone else. The actual commodity number for Q4 was very good, actually. But their guidance is for a big decline in COVID and PAXLOVID revenue. The PAXLOVID revenue is still, that guidance is way too high, I think. And they're talking about how there's been an inventory build. I don't know if Pfizer's a good short. I do think that, like most large caps, I mean, there's so many people looking at it, it's hard to see an obvious answer here. But again, the most surprising thing in the call is their notion that COVID revenue will come back and be persistent from 2024 to 2025 and 6 and 7 in 2028, which is very surprising. And it sounds like most of Wall Street, based on the stock price, doesn't really believe that's going to happen. But if you think about like Pfizer earnings power without COVID, I did some calculations, and maybe the answer is around $2 a share of earnings. So certainly the market is implying that there's some COVID revenue going forward, and I think that's fair, but not the level that they're saying. I think that if Moderna and BioNTech are shorts based on their COVID implied expectations, but I still think that you definitely have, Pfizer isn't really up, it's only up 10 cents, so the market's, I think, up more than that, so really not a factor. Yeah, there might be some persistent, for the older population, persistent COVID, but if you don't see it in the wild, if it just disappears from the wild, then the COVID revenue will go to zero. And I think that risk is significant. Nice thing about the stock market is you don't have to make a move if you don't understand the situation. And I think it's an important thing to remember. The nice thing about evaluating pharmaceutical companies is it's very modular. You can look at each drug asset individually and value them and then sort of sum them. Yeah, so it's sort of puzzling and somewhat tantalizing. Pfizer's not stupid. Their management may be a delusional on this aspect, but the fact they're even willing to say publicly that they think 2024 beyond COVID revenue will be significant and will even rebound from 2023. And, they hedged it a little bit. They weren't that gung-ho about it. They were said potentially. But they put the numbers on a slide. I mean, it could just be a dream. But if it's not a dream, then Pfizer stocks actually, Pfizer stock could actually be somewhat cheap. But it's hard to trust. and believe that. We'll have to see it quarter by quarter. But if COVID disappears from the wild, then I really don't see a future. And I'm not talking about just 2023 or 24, but will people really still get an annual booster for a disease that doesn't exist anymore? That's a bit unlikely. Yeah, it's hard to believe in management, and I think Wall Street probably doesn't fully believe the COVID hype, but it doesn't fully not believe it either. So it's somewhere in between. I saved my model, so if you want to pick it apart or download it, you can go on GitHub and get it yourself. Let me just upload. The model here. Yeah, so it's uploaded now. You can go pull it down on github.com/Shkreli/models. I didn't think that footage of the Pfizer exec was very interesting. I actually thought it was kind of sad. Takeaway is all the normal numbers were as expected. COVID quarter was fairly good for community. Guidance was for a steep decline in 2023 for COVID revenue, but management is saying 2024 and 2025 will rebound, which is very intriguing. Maybe delusional, maybe overestimated, maybe right. We don't know. We'll have to wait for 2024 and 2025. I'm a bit skeptical of that, but it is quite intriguing, and we'll definitely give the bulls something to believe in and latch on to. All right, we'll see y'all later. Thanks a lot. Bye.